make the strings.
Alright guys, so welcome back, part 4 of the K-Series all-wheel drive Honda Civic build. And I'm really excited for this episode because we might actually be trying to turn the, actually crank this thing up and see what it does. At least we're going to turn the key, hopefully. And we're going to turn the key and we're going to see if stuff turns on and powers up. But part of the reason why I'm so stoked about actually doing this is I've never done this before on a stock engine harness. So typically when people do a K-swap and they do something like this, they do a Honda K-Pro, which you basically take your stock ECU, they solder some other stuff in it, they put a real-time daughter board and everything in there with like a USB port, and you connect it to your ECU and you tune it basically like that. And doing that whole setup, you buy like a new, it's like $700 or something like that. There still is some limitations with K-Pro. I know a lot of people have made really fast cars on that and done 8s, 9s, you know, all that type of stuff. But on this project, I thought it would be really cool to actually work with ECU Master. So ECU Master, if you guys aren't aware of them, they it's kind of the best bang for your buck standalone engine management. So I have the same exact thing, the ECU Master EMU Black. You can see how small it is. And so I've run the engine in my 2JZ Swap Supra, or the VVTi Swap Supra. And you know, obviously we made like 580 wheel horse on there. E85 flex fuel sensor, drive-by-wire, 6 sequential inputs, outputs for, you know, ignition, as well as injection and, you know, boost control, and just like tons and tons of different stuff. And so it works really well. But one of the issues with that is they don't make a plug-and-play adapter yet. So I've been talking with Zach from ECU Master. He's the guy, he's the North American distributor, super smart guy, and he's goes with us to Adam's Adam LZ's when I go for his Pro 2 team. We were kind of talking about this whole project, and I was like, hey, when are you guys coming out with a plug-and-play adapter? He's like, oh, we're actually working on it. And so I started Googling it, searching, and I don't think anybody in the United States is actually running a K20 on the ECU Master. So that being said, it's super simple, I guess. Basically, you just take this stock, these plugs right here, this plug right here goes into the dash, basically. So you can see there's only these wires out of this 2 plug, and these go right into the ECU, plug in right there, and that's pretty much it. That's all the stuff that runs your harness. I think this is another thing that runs to like the transmission or like automatic, or maybe the body harness somewhere. But then this right here, typically you get a little jumper harness. This hooks up to like the underneath the dash of like your Civic, like your swap Civic. It gets power and a bunch of other stuff from in there. You actually get an OBD2 port. So we'll go ahead and plug that in right here. So that should give us power and do some stuff to kind of integrate it into the chassis, as far as the gauge cluster, and I think the fan, you know, just like AC stuff, all that input output stuff. So how do we connect this to ECU Master Black? And that is, they give you, with every one of these things, they give you these plugs. So what we're going to go ahead and do with that is we're going to cut off these plugs right here, and they have a pin out. So they have a pin out and they have a base map for the K20A2, which is pretty much exactly what we're running, K24A2. So we're going to go ahead and basically these inputs and outputs, we're going to look at the pin out of the stock ECU and this, and that thing, there's basically a diagram, and it basically just tells you where to do it. So it's going to be super simple. So I'm going to start stripping this stuff back and start cutting these guys off and actually wiring them to pins, and then actually slipping them into these connectors, and then basically plugging it into the ECU. And then we're still waiting on fuel system stuff for this car, but I might be able to rig something up with the factory fuel rail. It's a returnless system, so I might be able to throw a fuel pressure regulator on there real quick, like a 5-gallon bucket and a fuel pump, and we might be able to actually get this thing fired. If not, I could probably hook it up to, I could probably just go ahead and start it on starting fluid just to see if it runs. I think that would be really cool. But yeah, let me show you guys that pin out real quick. So if you come in here real quick, Super simple. So this is all the factory pins right there. You can see A and I think B are the only ones that we have to look at. So you can see ECU master pin B17 and ECM pin E3. So literally all we have to do is go right here and we find pin B17, which is on the black connector. So you go B17, which is analog in number 3, and then you go in there and that's LG3 logic ground, and we go over that is pin E3. So we do A, B, C, D, E. Actually, oh, we don't have that plug. Maybe that's this. I don't know. Maybe we ran into complications. Hold on. All right, guys. So crisis averted. We actually found. I guess that's one of the ones that, like I said, it came from the chassis, and I was wondering where that plug went anyhow. So this is our jumper harness that ties it into the. All right, we already talked about that, but I basically just need to wire it into this plug, so that'll be super simple. Guys, so crisis averted on the E plug. I actually found it right here on that. So this actually plugs in right here, and so what that would be is like I said, the logic ground. Basically, that is like a sensor ground or something like that. It's like a 0 voltage ground, like a clean ground for your sensors and stuff to kind of ground into. So basically, what I'll do is instead of tapping into these wires for the E outputs and stuff, I'll go ahead and actually do. Obviously there's no E-plug on here, so I'll just use this E-plug from the standalone. So if we get right here, this is the E connector. So fuel pump relay, main relay, O2 heater relay detects ignition signal, brake switch, speed sensor output, RPM output, and the mill. So basically like the check engine light. So that is basically this E-plug right there. So I'll have to do basically some outputs from the ECU for, like, you know, the check engine light, you know, just simple stuff like that. So simple enough, I guess. Let's get started. So what I think we have here is a standalone engine harness. I'm pretty stoked about that. Obviously, I'll tighten this stuff up a little bit and kind of, you know, zip tie it all together. Probably throw some you know, black tape and stuff on it once I get everything finalized. You can see there's a bunch of extra wires that are in these plugs right here, and a lot of that stuff is just going to be like emissions related stuff, like evap purge stuff. O2 sensor stuff, because I'm not actually running the O2 sensor off of the wideband. I'm just using the AEM gauge and using the 0 to 5 volt signal and going to tap that into the ECU. So I'm going to have to tie that in a little bit as well, or actually, you know, kind of pin that in. Yeah, it's just crazy how simple, because essentially this right here will run the car, like just that right there. Which compared to everything, I think all in all it's like 30 pins. There's still a couple pins like right here. So I basically wrote down all the pins that I needed to pin into this ECU, and then kind of did a little check mark with them as I went down. We did run into a little bit of a pickle for just a second, where I got actually got really confused, because the pin out online was actually for an ECU Master Classic, which that only has a 24 pin plug right here instead of the 39 pin plug. So it basically was a plug just like that on this side. So I started looking at stuff, and it just started looking weird. Like it was a sensor ground that was going into, I think it was like the TPS in, or just something really weird like that. And I just didn't, I was like, well, why is like a sensor ground going into the TPS in? It just didn't make sense. And so I went back and I remember there's a, on the download section of the ECU Master's website, there's actually a thing in there kind of saying, you know, to switch over the pinout, basically the cross-reference. So that's where you see these extra things right here. So the black, so B18, that switched to B29, that's all sensor ground stuff. Same thing as right here, like B4 switched to B5, B21 switched to B32, and basically just a couple simple things like that. So it wasn't too big of a deal. And the good thing is all I had to do on the ones that I already pinned in was just, you know, depin them and basically pull it out of that slot, slide it into the other one, and we were all good. And then the other thing that helped me out is to reference the colors on the wire, is I was just, if I got confused, I would be like, okay, well, it was A30, and that's this yellow and green wire, and, you know, and then I could kind of cross-reference it back from there if I did get a little bit confused. So yeah, I think one of the things that I'm going to use some of these extra kind of inputs and output type of things for is, since they're already going into the harness, into the engine bay, like this thing has a built-in map sensor in it, so I don't have to actually run a map sensor in the engine bay. So for example, like the map sensor is a 2-wire plug, the boost control sensor is a 2-wire plug. So basically what I'll do is I'll cut off the map sensor thing, I'll tie it into the map sensor wiring on this side that goes into the ECU, I'll pin it into the EMU black, and then that will basically be my boost control output, is going through the map sensor wire, but it's pinned in differently because we're not using a map sensor because it has an internal map sensor. So hopefully you guys could kind of follow along with that. We did go ahead and try throwing on this RBC manifold. You can see I got a little adapter right there to the Skunk 2 throttle body. But yeah, so it kind of was sticking this in there, kind of doing a little cross-reference, just making sure everything's going to kind of fit and line up well with that. Again, I would like to try to get this thing fired up either on, you know, just some starting fluid or maybe a bucket or something. But I should have a lot of fuel stuff here on Friday, so we might just kind of plug that all in. I really want to start this thing on starting fluid, so we'll probably end up doing that before the end of this video. But it's like 3 in the morning. I've been sitting here pinning this thing for a while now, and I'm glad that I finally figured it out. And honestly, it wasn't that hard. So yeah, we'll come back, we'll plug it into the car, we'll tie it into this E-plug with, I want to get some sort of like a 5 or a 6 pin connector and actually use that so that this can be standalone of this. So these plugs are obviously going to have to go through the firewall. I don't want to have to backfeed all this stuff through the firewall too, and then basically leave these harnesses connected, because this is all under the dash, this is all in the engine bay, so I want them separate, so where it's just like another little plug that'll plug in. So we'll figure that out. I think I have some connectors off of like a 370Z I parted out a couple years ago. So yeah, sorry this video is getting really technical and just kind of explaining it, but if you guys ever wanted to do this, it would probably help you guys out a lot, and I'll show you a little bit more of the crimping process tomorrow as well. So I'll be back. Alright guys, so been plugging away at this harness, getting pretty close on it, and the one thing that I had left to do was this E-plug right here. So this is the E-plug that basically plugs into the ECU on that side, and we only had 2 of the connectors coming off of the engine harness, so that actually tied into this harness right here. So this is like the main relay trigger. What else is this one? One is like the fuel pump relay, one's the coolant temp sensor, and then now the one that I'm currently working on right now, this is the tachometer signal that comes from the ECU, and it actually goes into the gauge cluster of the car. So now, so what I went ahead and did right there is I just went scrolling down the list. Let's see if it'll focus right there. So you could see tachometer, E26 right there. So E26. So basically I scrolled back over here, found E26 right there, which happened to be that little purple one right there on the bottom. So I went ahead and snipped that. I did a little heat shrink butt connector into this little auxiliary harness that I got. This is out of a 370Z. There's a bunch of little plugs like this kind of by the ECU or the main fuse box in it. I parted one of these cars out a couple years ago, and this was just something I had laying around because I want to make sure that these harnesses will be able to be separated, and so that I don't have to stuff this whole harness through the grommet in the engine base, basically, because I didn't want to tie these things together. So I wanted to have like a nice clip, and obviously I can't do anything with this one, so I'm doing this. So now I went ahead and wired it to that, wired it to this. So now I actually need to do the pin to the ECU. So you can see I went ahead and I stripped it right there on the end already, and I'm going to show you guys how to actually do one of these little connectors. So you can see I grab these little pins. I grab a little I'll go right there, kind of hold it, bend it back and forth, kind of break the edge of it off. Then I have these little crimpers right here, and they're actually like wire crimper things. So what you try to do, it's like it's focusing on everything around it, this, but this. Let's see if I can get it to focus. Okay, so it's kind of halfway in focus right there. And so what you do is you stick that in right here. I really want to be able to show you guys this. All right, so you can see this is upside down, but basically what you do is you just go ahead and pinch that. It kind of curls up the wires a little bit, and then on these ones the wire is kind of small, so it doesn't crimp it 100%. So what I've been actually doing is kind of pinching it down with the one next to it, and that seems like the little bit smaller one. I am using E, but there's like two versions of E on here. Once you guys see these things, you'll understand. There's like a big E and a small E, and then you could see what we have left over. Come on, this thing is not focusing at all. All right, we can see what we have left over is that little thing, and that basically needs to get crimped around the wire. So we'll go to kind of the bigger E of them. Now it's gonna be weird. Okay, and we'll basically just pinch that right there. So now we have a nice solid connection. A little bit crooked. Sometimes I'll just kind of bend these things halfway straight, and so that they slide in the connector all right. And then we basically need to go to G5. So you can see this is G because it's gray. So basically we go 8, count back to 5, and we'll go ahead and plug it in. So I've been running this harness kind of up under here, and so that's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so I stick the harness up under that. See if I could get, I wish I had my head cam for this. So then basically you just slip it into there. That's number 5. Pretty sure that's number 5. And so yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll actually slip this guy up in there. You need to hear it click. Hear that click, and then we're good to go. So that is that's essentially what you do, like 35 times I think is what you do on here. And the other thing is this harness does have a couple extra wires in and out of it, so I'm going to actually tie that into like the input for the wideband, the input for the flex fuel sensor, all that type of stuff, just so I could keep it 100% plug and play kind of underneath the dash. So that's kind of the thought process. I think there's only a couple more of these E's that I need to do. Let's see, E31, which is the check engine light, and then there's B6. Yeah, I think E31 for the check engine light is the only thing else I need. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then I'll probably go ahead and wire in the one for the boost. Well, maybe we'll do the boost later, because I think I'll be able to actually do that out of this harness. I'll have to find something that's actually in the engine bay, but we might throw it in the engine bay and see if we can get this thing to crank up, or maybe we'll wait a little bit. All right, so I pretty much got all that stuff wired in that I need to do for the ECU side. So now I'm gonna go ahead and do like the boost by gear type of stuff. So there's gonna be an output, which I'm gonna put to G13, which is an output. So the nice thing about, well, I think a lot of standalone do this too, but what I'm doing is just kind of going over some stuff and cross-referencing things. So you can see like auxiliary 1 right there, that's my idle output. Auxiliary 2, you could see that's G13. That's what I set as my boost solenoid output. Tachometer output. Let's see, I think the check engine light is G5, or yeah, that's G12 right there. So just kind of double checking some stuff. You could see I have some extra H bridges right there, which I'm using one for basically the VTC. And then you have all the ignition outputs. You'd also come up here to the top and you could show assigned inputs. So you can see there's barely any inputs actually using for like the auxiliary stuff. So you can see I'll go ahead and do sensor setup, oxygen sensor. I'm gonna do the auxiliary analog input number 1. That's gonna be my wideband input, since I am using an external controller. Basically being the wideband gauge, I'm just gonna hook up that little white wire that goes from 0 to 5 volts. Basically go into the ECU settings and change that over. So you'll go right here to oxygen sensor. You can see I have it set up for external controller, and because you normally have to wire in the wideband to like a bunch of different pins, so I'll just click external controller, and then you'll AFR at 0 volts, change that AFR at 5 volts, and then analog input 1. So that's pretty simple right there. What else can I do? So I am going to be wiring in some a fuel pressure sensor as well as an oil pressure sensor. So I think I'll go ahead and tie those into the auxiliary ports too, and probably tie them into the other wires that go through the harness. Like I said, I'm gonna have some extra stuff for the evap stuff, but I'll come back here in a little bit and we'll try messing with it a little bit. I would like to try to get this thing fired tonight before basically the end of this video, but hopefully you guys are stoked about this. I know there's a lot of information kind of going in here and me kind of rambling, trying to explain stuff, but hopefully if you were ever wanting to do this yourself, this video would help you out a lot, because it would have definitely kind of helped me kind of be more confident going into it. But I'll be back in a little bit and we'll figure some more stuff out. Alright guys, so playing around with a little bit of the layout of the harness, trying to figure out how this thing is going to go in the engine bay. You can see this stuff is pretty straightforward. This is all coil packs. This stuff down here goes to the VTEC solenoids, or VTEC solenoid, pressure switch, and then the VTC stuff. Obviously injectors and all that stuff are pretty simple over here. But where I'm kind of running into some issues is you can see how long this whole piece is right here. And this wastegate placement I would definitely say isn't optimal. So I thought about actually like cutting that and doing like a little 90 and then doing the wastegate kind of going straight back. But I think we'll have to kind of get some other stuff. So I have a water neck from K-Tuned that should be here pretty soon, actually, hopefully tomorrow or at the latest Monday. So that should change the angles of some of this stuff. It's the upper water neck. And then since we did switch to the RBC intake manifold, the stock K24 has an internal like water port right there. So we have to have a little adapter to actually kind of convert the K24 head to a little water thing. You can see this one has it built into the head right there. So we're basically deleting that, but it needs to hook up to that little coolant hose right there. And then, yeah, so you can see I got the throttle body all hooked up. It's kind of interesting because the RBC manifold has a map sensor port in it, and then the top of the Skunk 2 thing has a map sensor port, so I basically had to rob both map sensors just to plug the hole, TPS, and then the idle air control goes on the bottom, and that's kind of touching the radiator a little bit. So I'm stoked to be working with Koyo on this project as well. This is their K-swapped radiator, and this is actually for an EG Civic or an Integra. I don't think the engine bays are too terribly different, so we should be okay right there. They also have some part numbers on their website that kind of help you with picking hoses and stuff. So I went ahead and ordered the hoses, and you can see it kind of bolts down here. I need to play with this bracket a little bit more since we don't have a whole lot of room, but I need to play with the bracket a little bit and move this thing back a little bit. You can see on this side, it actually kind of sits up under there, and this is a bleeder port too. But this is a really cool radiator. It's an end flow design, so basically the water goes in up here, goes down there, and then around, so it actually goes in front over there and then back down and around, or back in, you know, whatever like that. Just kind of gives it the coolant a lot more of a chance to actually cool down with the radiator fans and, you know, the air moving for it. So we should be able to make this whole thing work. I need to figure out some radiator fans as well. That's going to be in probably the next video. We'll kind of be plumbing a lot of stuff, but I would definitely like to get this harness kind of situated a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and take off this whole plastic piece, try to see if I can get it to manipulate it to work in the engine bay a little bit better. Alright guys, so got the engine harness all laid out kind of in there, and I'm having a couple issues. So the ECU isn't getting power and it's not turning on, and I don't know, actually I probably do know why. So I was looking and you could see B13 right there is battery 12 volt, and it actually doesn't have anything going into the connector right there. So there's nothing giving it power, so to B13. Actually, hold on. Yep, there's no wire going into B13. So the other thing is there was this one that has ignition 12 volts. So I checked G18 and there's no voltage actually going to that either. So I don't know if it has to do with maybe this little harness down here. So this kind of ties into the battery wiring in this situation. So I don't know, but I feel like this is just like battery cables and all this type of stuff there. I do have the engine grounded, but yeah, so this harness right here is from the CRV. You can see that right there. And then, I mean, maybe there are some wires in there that actually need to tell it to turn on. And then this is for the TSX. So these are basically two female connections, and I need one with kind of a male connection. So I need to actually swap the charge harness off of the CRV engine since I'm using the CRV harness. So maybe that's something that we'll do tomorrow. I'm pretty tired. It's like 2 in the morning, and I've been kind of like scratching my head at this thing for like an hour and a half and trying to figure out that and lay out the harness. So do need to extend a couple things. Like I'm going to extend this wire, the coolant temp wire, and a couple little things. I do have a lot of this stuff kind of labeled again so that I know exactly what it is, because it gets kind of confusing when it's laying there on the bench. But we'll be back here tomorrow, and we'll see if we could get her fired up then. Alright guys, so a little bit of an update. I got back to the shop, been basically messing with this thing for like 2.5 hours trying to make it work. And the harness that I got was like I guess it was like the cheaper knockoff version off of eBay, just for like the under dash swap harness or whatever. So it's been doing some weird stuff. I don't know, it's just not triggering it. So we manually triggered the relay, like the actual relay, and then it turns on the ECU, but I think there's a wiring issue on my side of stuff. So the ECU master, it just beeps. So I messaged Zach, and he's like, hey, when there's a wiring issue, it just beeps. It goes like meh the whole time. So I'm gonna mess with the harness here in a little bit, but one of the things that I want to do is actually try to fire this thing up. There's no oil in it right now, and so in order to actually do that, I need to, well, I don't want to put oil in it because I still need to do the oil drain. So I might as well just pull the pan off it real quick and weld the bung on it for the turbo drain for the oil. The other thing I had to do was actually swap this crank position sensor. The one off of the K24A2, the 07 TSX, was different than the one off of the CRV, or the one that the CRV harness wanted. So I basically just used the one off of the CRV since I'm using the CRV harness. And I wonder if there's like an issue with my actual CRV harness. Like, I wonder if that's what it is, if I should just be using the A2 harness. I mean, up until now, I think everything was looking like it was good until we actually stuck it in the car. But the throttle position sensor voltage works, so I guess that's a good thing. But yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull this oil pan down, throw a quick weld on it, and then I'll just put a cap on it, and then put some fresh oil in it, so that way it's basically ready to start as soon as we go. Because there's a lot of parts coming in this week, and almost as soon as as much stuff as I could do right now, I should probably do, so that way when we get to certain things, I'm not getting stuck on stupid stuff like this later. So do that now. All right, so got the oil pan all welded up right there. You can see I just welded it on the inside, so there's no welds on the outside. But I got a 60-degree fitting right there, which should be about perfect. And the nice thing is the dipstick level is like right below that. So should have good oil drainage. In the back of the engine, basically the oil level is all the way up to right there. It's like level with the back of the engine. And so I was watching one of the Boosted Boys videos, and he was talking about how he had some issues in the MR2 previously because that's where he had the oil drain on it. And so on his Waggle van, he actually has the oil drain in the front. And since this is a Sidewinder, it should just kind of snake down over the transmission and drain right here in the front, hopefully. So hopefully we don't have any issues with that. I'm gonna let this sit up for a little bit before I pour some oil in it, but I'm gonna start messing with the harness again. All right, so we accidentally did something, and it's probably gonna run, I'm assuming. Oh, don't even have I guess the map sensor don't need hooked up, huh?
It don't matter, it's just starting.
Man.
Eyes burning yet?
Oh, man. Woo!
How do your eyes feel? They burn?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like alcohol almost.
Alright, so as you guys seen, it did just start on starting fluid, and it sounds really nice. It sounds like super mean. I guess that's like, I think these things are 11-to-1 compression factory. And so it sounds really angry. Could be because I was like standing right here and the exhaust is just kind of coming out right there. So it's really freaking loud and my ears still almost hurt. But so having an issue with it right now where the ECU basically just kind of has like a beep, and this is like a fault. So that's what the ECU does when something's wired wrong. When you first turn on the ECU, it's only supposed to have like one beep, not like a just shrieking beep that lasts forever. So I think I have something wired a little bit wrong, but I am really surprised that it actually starts. But I'm gonna go ahead and get this harness pulled out of here and and start messing with it a little bit more and kind of trying to diagnose it on the bench. It doesn't take too long to get it out. But yeah, I think that's probably going to be it for this video, guys. I really do appreciate you guys watching this thing. And if you guys are interested in this whole project and you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Leave a comment, thumbs up, and we'll see you guys later.